George, you promised to give me one of these when it gets boring. Good evening, and thank you very much. Thank you for this award, but I must tell you, I accept this award not so much for myself, but for our Greek community. It's amazing to me over the past 20 years in particular, I've become so focused on how less than 1% of the American population, or just slightly over 0.5% of the population, how impactful we are to this great American community of ours, how much of an impact and contribution we make to it. And frankly, it's for that Greek community that I am really standing here very proud of. I'm going to mention a few friends that typify this wonderful story of Americans and Greek Americans. And I want to recognize people like George Marcus, very successful investors. Great, save the applause, great philanthropist, great political influencer, and the guy is just signing another $5 billion deal. It's amazing to me. Tony Thermopoulos, former CEO of ABC. Jim Giannopoulos, who regrettably, please, no clapping. I got to continue here because George is going to give me one of these. So, Jim Giannopoulos, who regrettably isn't here, but thousands and millions of entrepreneurs across the country that make a contribution every day, are very successful with their families, friends all around the world. I see young people in London and New York entering the investment banking community, private equity, hedge funds. It's remarkable to me to watch this young group of people like political people like the Manitoses, who give us incredible insight and impact in the political system. Young men like John Sarbanes, Bilirakis, Dina Titus. It's remarkable. Just to mention a few friends, folks like Mike Jaharis that you saw, very successful pharmaceutical executive. He's a huge philanthropist. He started the Byzantium wing at the Metropolitan Museum in New York. John Katsimatidis, a political figure, a philanthropist as well, a strong Hellenic supporter. About a few weeks ago, I had dinner in New York with a gentleman by the name of Stavridis. Jim was the commander-in-chief of all NATO forces around the world. In Brussels, he retired last July. He's now head of the Fletcher School at Tufts, the greatest diplomacy school in the world. 3 or 4 days ago, when I came in, I had dinner here in LA. 2 young men, Antholis. Carrie's head of HBO. His brother, William, who lives in Washington, he just returned from a 2-year sabbatical in China and India. He took his young girls, the young daughters, and his wife. He wrote an excellent book. He reviewed it here in LA, and Marianne and I were fortunate to be there because they're close friends. But they're young guys, and this book will no doubt be an easy reference for the foreign policy, folks who work in foreign policy with India and China. He is remarkable. A few months ago, another brilliant young man, Dimitriadis. He's a scientist. I know, George, you had him at your event. He called me and asked me to accompany him at an award in New York, which I did, where he received a very prestigious scientific award. And I was very proud to see that. He's an MIT physicist, a medical doctor from Harvard, and a very, very bright guy. He and I don't agree with everything about what the future holds, but still a very stimulating personality. There's many others. John Calamos in Chicago, Calamos Funds, but also a big supporter of the Hellenic Museum, something he wants to leave as a legacy behind. I'm a trustee of that. Faith organization started by Mike Jaharis, which tries to foster Hellenism and Orthodoxy. And we must never forget that our religion is really the cornerstone of our culture, and that's one of the reasons I feel very committed to supporting it. So there's so many, I'm so proud, researchers, scientists, doctors, thousands upon thousands that I get exposed to, and I'm very, very proud, and it's for them that I accept this award with truly due honor to the sacrifices of our parents. So thank you very much for this, and thank to the Greek community. I was asked to give a few words of my background, so I'll try to keep it very brief. After graduate school, I joined a wonderful company whose personality and my own was just connected very well, and I enjoyed that journey tremendously. It was General Telephone Electronics. Today it's Verizon. I started as a young analyst. Very quickly thereafter, I moved to Europe. I've lived pretty much all over the world. I became the Director of Finance, CFO, then Vice President General Manager. We had plants all over Europe, South Africa, offices, Eastern Europe, Northern Scandinavia. We did tremendous contracts. We had a $500 million contract when I was only 26 in Algeria. The best thing about the contract was that at one point we had 164 young students in European universities and US universities, engineers, who basically have stayed behind, even though the project did not make a lot of economic sense, not for our company, but for the country. This education for the young engineers is clearly made an impact on that country. We got a $2 billion contract in Iran when I was 27, and we turned on a major, highly integrated telecommunication system for the country of Iran. I remember being there when I was 27, standing not too far from the Shah, when they celebrated the 2,200th anniversary of the Persian Empire in Persepolis. I also became aware of the SAVAK, which was his right-hand Gestapo organization, but that's another subject for another conversation. I took over the international business with GT&E. They were doing about $4.5 billion at the time. When I was 29, by far their youngest senior VP, I traveled almost all over the world. Joint ventures from Japan to India to Malaysia to Australia, all over Latin America. We ran the telephone company in Argentina, Mexico. We had plants in lighting, precision materials, telecommunications, almost everywhere. Very challenging times. Currencies in those days were fluctuating tremendously, and when you were a US-based company, it was very complex to convert those currencies into US dollars and continue to show the earnings per share increasing. Inflation was running in places like Argentina and Venezuela and Brazil, 60% a month. It was an extremely challenging and an extremely fun environment for me. The Bretton Woods Accords basically brought some stability to the world currencies, but it was something that truly has stimulated my life tremendously. I want to thank, actually, this journey that I've enjoyed with such tremendous passion. I attribute it to three things in my life. First, I got to ask and thank God because He gave me health. He gave me tremendous energy and an incredible curiosity. I want to thank my parents because they gave me a love and respect, which gave me tremendous confidence to pursue this aggressive journey in almost every corner of the world. I would travel 30 days a month in some different continent. And to fully satisfy my curiosity, I would stop in Ipanema or Copacabana Beach in Rio, or Phuket in Thailand, or Monaco and Saint-Tropez. I didn't want to leave any part of my life unsatisfied. In any event, this was a wonderful, wonderful journey. I also want to thank Marianne, my wife, who 30 plus years. She's been the steady propeller to our family. 3 male A personalities and constant hecticness around myself and the boys. And she's been able to maintain, I should say probably control, all of those aspects of our lives, and I give her tremendous regards. My sons Evan and Darren have been really game changers in a lot of these brands as we started making these acquisitions, 78 companies over the past 25, 27 years. And they really gave us a lot of out-of-the-box thinking. I've had a lot of executives, multi-million-dollar gentlemen and ladies with tremendous experience, but some elements and some dimensions of unique out-of-the-box thinking always somehow came from them, and I've enjoyed working with them very closely. I'm going to touch on business very briefly, but there's a subject that I've never discussed before, and I'll try not to bore you with it, but it's become a passion since I started to think about it for this evening. But global business is expanding dramatically. It's exciting to watch global business grow. Two basic ingredients that fuel global business. One is capital. For many, many years, banks, major banks, small banks, community banks have always been the source of capital for investment and growth and new businesses. Over the past 20, 25 years, a new source of capital has developed that's very exciting, and that is, and there's a lot more flexible and much more risk-inviting, and that has fueled tremendous innovation and growth around the world. This is private equity, hedge funds, venture capital. This capital structures its investments in ways that allow them to take control of equity or have equity, influence management, and certainly help restructure businesses by the investors themselves if necessary. Entrepreneurs with ideas, companies in trouble, every opportunity in the world that cannot find capital in its traditional form through banks has sought this capital, and it's been very exciting. Has fueled growth and opportunities from Africa to Asia to all over the world, certainly in this country. It will continue to do so for many years. I think global growth will continue. I know there's bubbles and hyper speculation at times that causes corrections, as we saw in '08. But the rebirth of that is another resurgence of tremendous energy and growth, and I think smart people should stay steady the course, and there's no way that global growth is going to disappoint. But global growth isn't all positive, and that's the subject of my next few minutes discussion. And I'm not used to discussing this subject. It's a tremendous issue, and I never really hear very much about it. Certainly in my own thinking, it hasn't played much of a part. I don't see it being discussed by the media, politicians, business people, and it's a remarkable subject, and that is the resources of this global growth of our planet are being terribly stressed and terribly challenged. And I'm amazed that more of us aren't discussing this subject much more openly and debated. Population growth has been a remarkable factor that has put tremendous pressure on resources. In 1805, there was 1 billion people in this world. By 1930, that's 125 years later, there were 2 billion people. By 1960, only 30 years later, 3 billion people. Today, 7.2 billion people. We're adding 80 to plus 85 million people every single year. We will have 9.2 billion people by 2050. That's in 35 years. 220,000 people join the dinner table every single evening. Additional people that are born every single year. This is remarkable. Additionally, population is growing older. In the past 10, 15 years, the average age has gone from 72 to closer to 78, 80. It is expected that every 20 years, we're going to see another 7 to 10 year addition to our population and to our aging. This puts tremendous pressure on our resources, food, water, etc. In addition to this population, it's becoming more affluent. 2 billion people have joined the middle class in the past 15 to 20 years. That's going to become 3 billion very soon. This affluence puts tremendous demand on resources. More cars, more homes, more fuel, more infrastructure, furniture. It is causing havoc. Incredibly, this population is also consuming far more meat protein. 38 pounds a year in meat was being consumed in 1970. Today, that number is close to 100. What does that mean? We had 1.1 billion animals, cows, goats, sheep, and pigs on the earth just 40 years ago, 50 years ago, 1.1 billion. Today, we have 3.5 billion animals around the world. They in turn have to be fed, they graze. In many parts of the world, Africa and so forth, they way overgraze the the earth, and we have tremendous windstorms, thousands of windstorms that are causing havoc. Not too long ago, Ted Turner sent me a little note, and there's an organization called Earth Policy Institute, and I joined them for that. And I started to become very interested in this subject. I saw some satellite images, 1970 and today. The Earth looks remarkably different in that short period of time. The amount of deserts that have combined and united, if I tell you, 1,500 square miles of land in Africa is becoming arid, becoming a desert. 868,000 acres alone in Nigeria, the most populous country, is being lost to desert. Morocco, Algeria, 100,000. In Middle East, thousands of acres have been lost. Villages are being consumed by sandstorms. East China and Western Mongolia are developing one of the biggest deserts ever to be seen. 600 square miles a day. They're uniting and becoming the biggest deserts. Not everywhere in the world. There's not a place in the world. This erosion of soil. We have 6 inches of soil on top of this earth that has been the food basket of humanity since the beginning of time. The erosion is doing tremendous damage. So in addition to all this farm animals, we have another factor that's come in the past 25 years, and that is a huge investment in biofuels. Literally 30% of all food and grains we produce around the world the past 20 years is going to biofuels, ethanol, etc. That's remarkable. That's to continue to fuel car demand around the globe. Very unsustainable. Very unsustainable. So we have, as you look at these satellite images, you have several pictures. Uniting deserts, deforestation, remarkable. We lose 5.6 million hectares a year to deforestation. Countries like Pakistan, the Middle East, North Korea, all over the world. Pakistan is almost without forests. Similarly, a lot of countries that were fairly rich in forests 50, 60 years ago, the forests are disappearing. One of the greatest gifts nature has given us, the Amazon. Amazon is the most biodiverse area in the world. It balances, not only does it have tremendous plants and animals unique to its location, it fuels a lot of our pharmaceutical products, and it keeps a balance between carbon dioxide and the oxygen we need to live. Literally 25% of the Amazon is pretty much obliterated. The Cerrado, which is the basin in the Amazon that feeds Brazil, northern Argentina, Paraguay, 200 million acres, 100 million has been devastated, acres. So when you look at these satellite images, the deserts, the deforestation is just causing havoc. Remarkably, the Glacial Institute in Zurich is noticing in the past 10 years, glaciers are melting at an unprecedented rate. The Himalayas, the most magnificent glaciers of all, 70% of those glaciers have disappeared, and by 2050, they expect almost the entire glacier complex to be gone. That glacier feeds 580 to 6 million Chinese. The Yellow Yangtze River, the Tibetan Plateau, it also feeds the Indus River, 180 going to 250 Pakistanis, and many of the Indian people. So this is remarkable. Rivers, this is a remarkable statistic. Rivers are declining everywhere. The Colorado River, for example, 47% of this river was discharged to the Pacific just 30 years ago. Today it trickles down to about 7%. States like California, Colorado, Utah, Nevada, Arizona are draining, sprawling cities are draining this river, and it's significant demand. And there's a lot of question as to what's going to happen. The Rockies, the Andes, the Alps are all melting. 40 to 50% of these snow caps have melted. Remarkable picture. I hate to be so negative, but in fact, that's what amazes me, why the debate isn't far more active. And politically, we're all consumed by politics and business and all of that, and it is certainly my passion. But these statistics really caught me tremendously off guard when I started to look into them. How have we kept up with this? Remarkably, by the way, one last item. when this water and the aquifer and the glaciers are disappearing, people resort to another wonderful natural resource, and those are aquifers. Our whole globe it has aquifers within the earth, and those are being depleted at unprecedented rates. 100 million wells have been built over the past 25 years. They used to dig somewhere between 150 to 200 feet to get the water. Today it's going to 1,000 to 1,500 feet. Water tables in the earth are dropping at 20 feet per year. Remarkable. So you have erosion, deserts, deforestation. If I give you some statistic, and the population, by the way, is growing like crazy. Just Africa. Yeah, I was at a JP Morgan conference that I spoke at a couple months ago, and I was curious. I was speaking about a banal subject like how to structure a balance sheet for companies that need restructuring. Can you imagine? Nevertheless, the chief economist from JP Morgan, also the head of the IMF, who was a former economist for JP Morgan, we're talking about growth around the world. We talk about the African continent is going to be the fastest growing continent in the next 10 years, 5+% a year in real growth. And I didn't say much, and we had dinner, and I asked him, I said, Tom, tell me, here's a continent that's got 1 billion people. Sub-Saharan Africa has 894 million people today. By the year 2050, they're going to have 2.2 billion people. India, Pakistan, Bangladesh have 1.6 billion today. They're going to have 2.2 billion people by 2050. Luckily, 44 educated countries in the world have stabilized their population. Europe, Russia, China, Japan, certainly the United States, many countries in Asia have stabilized their population, but there's still a population problem. So I said to this gentleman, so 5% growth sounds great. The country's losing 1,500, the continent is losing 1,500 square miles a day to desert. The population is growing like crazy. So what is the future of this economic growth? Where do we go with this? And he says, that's an issue that frankly is beyond my pay grade. And he really hadn't thought about it. That's remarkable to me how many brilliant people are not thinking about this issue of the challenges of the global resources. How have we managed this so far? Humans are tremendously resourceful. 1 acre of land in 1950 produced a ton of food. That same acre of land today produces 7 to 9 tons of food. It's genetic engineering, short stock wheat, double cropping throughout the year, a better rotation of crops, far more sophisticated irrigation. The introduction of fertilizer and potassium has tremendously enriched the earth. But what we've been seeing in the past 10 years is a tremendous plateauing of this. Secondly, oceans, by the way, we have fished the oceans to an unsustainable limit. Today, the oceans cannot reproduce to the pace we're doing. Remarkably enough, countries have begun farm fishing. We today farm fish almost 80 million tons. We ocean fish approximately 80 million tons, so another source of food. But we're seeing plateauing there too. The Earth is also warming. Since 1970 to 2010, 1 centigrade of additional heat on the Earth. That cuts the yield. Scientists have shown that 1 degree centigrade cuts food production by 10%. Let me give you another issue, a couple of statistics that are remarkable to me. By the way, countries like China that are getting far more expanding deserts are buying land in Ethiopia, Philippines, Laos, Vietnam, and 143 million acres of land has been sold. 1 million Ethiopians in the past 3 years have been moved from their native land at almost no money by corrupt governments that have sold it or leased it long-term to some of these land grab efforts that have been going on. So that's another issue. These rivers that I talked about, the Colorado, the Nile starts at the Kilimanjaro, Lake Victoria, and moves north to the Mediterranean. Similarly, 57% of the Nile will discharge into the Mediterranean. 30 years ago. Today it's down to a trickle 15%. Ethiopia, the Yemens, and Egypt, of course, the breadbasket of historical empires. The Nile would overflow, tremendous soil would come in and enrich the production of Egypt's wheat and grains, fed the Roman Empire and many others, the Persian empires. Well, Egypt is in some real trouble. The population is expanding dramatically. Ethiopia is at the headwaters of the Nile. They're putting in a major dam that's going to reduce water tremendously. The Tigris-Euphrates, which was a fertile crescent, is now getting drier and drier. Turkey's putting a huge hydroelectric dam at the headwaters of this, and the UN estimates that 30% of Syria's water is going to reduce, 60% of Iraq's, and that will impact Jordan and Iran tremendously. In China, because again the growing deserts, the Indus River is being dammed by several dams that have been built over the past recent years, and the Indus River that feeds millions of people is beginning to get dry. The new geopolitical future is going to involve major issues around water and food supply. Anyway, what can we do about it? Education, education, education is number one. Every country that's educated has been doing much, much better. Every one of us, every country in the world has got major resource challenges, but some are very, very stressed. By the way, India that has 2% of the land, 18% of the population, 15% of the animals, and 25% of their land has been lost to desert. Tremendous stress on water and resources. But everywhere where there's education, there's much better control of the environment, education, and so on. So, and I'm sorry, the environment, the resources, and so on. Education is critical. Do we have enough time to educate enough people in the world? Still, to penetrate education in parts of the world is an extremely complicated and difficult thing, and I'll go into an anecdote about that. Governments have to do much more. China did it through controls, which I know are very unpopular in democratic states. Nevertheless, what we can do far more, including America, tax policies that favor thermal energy, solar, wind energy, and penalizes things like coal and fossil fuels. Obsolete budgets for military, 2 million people on the ground with boots for America. Obsolete military equipment is a big waste of resources for the whole world. When we put all of these military spending together, a big waste. I don't know how we're going to address that, but nevertheless, far more productive places can utilize those investments than obsolete military. So that's the hope. Everybody has to somehow get engaged and try to make an influence and have an influence through their political system, through television opportunities, and even for something like this is why I chose to talk about this subject this evening. Well, thank you very much.
Congratulations again to our honorees. Thank you all for being here. The band is going to be back. Maybe we can see Dean do some of that fantastic dancing. Maybe Maria can sing. John Bazookia will have a nice night. Thank you all for being here.